everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask You Anything presented by Mosher Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Mosher's Director of Personnel. We're glad you're with us for this episode of Ask You Anything, and with us today is Mosher's Director of Marketing, Malinda Lowder, who joins us today to talk about living with intent and purpose. You probably heard that phrase before, you might even live by it, but what does it really take to live with intent and purpose? How do you do things with intent? What does this have to do with technology? Yeah, I've got a couple questions I want to ask, but with that and much more, we will get to on this week's episode of Ask Anything with Malinda. You all know Malinda. She's our Director of Marketing. She's the head of this podcast, my enabler, if you will. She always brings us interesting topics to talk about on Ask Anything, and today is no exception. Malinda, thanks again for being with us on Ask Anything.
Thanks, Angel. It's great to be here again.
Well, I guess the first question that comes to mind for me is, and we've all have said this in some form or fashion, or we might even think it every day, the term living with intent and purpose. What does that mean?
Yeah. And, it's just easy to get wrapped up in our everyday lives, right? I mean, the drumming of life, marching through the week, taking the kids to school, all of those things. And most people only stop to ask themselves what they want to accomplish in December or January, when you do New Year's resolutions. And we all know how long those last. But, when you make a New Year's resolution, like any personal planner will tell you, be very specific and put an end date and a start date and all of those things. They say exactly what you want to do, exactly when you're going to do it. And that's great. That's a great way to accomplish something specific that you want to do in the year. But when we talk about living with intent and purpose, it's more than that. It's not just something you want to accomplish, right? It's not, I want to attend 2 conferences this year. I want to get my certification. It's what you want your life to mean and how you can bring that into your everyday in little ways in order to accomplish that and have it be meaningful for you day to day. It's not a logical process. It's more of an emotional process or a spiritual process. So the difference between those things is important. Logical thinking about it and spiritual or purposeful thinking about it. So I'm going to give you a little example about the difference between those two types of thoughts and what that can mean. So about 10 years ago, I was running my own company, my own freelance business, and I was closing it. So I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. It was sort of failing, I was sort of giving up on it. So I decided to go back to corporate life. And the job market 10 years ago didn't look anything like it does today. I know Angel's very familiar, probably with the job market of 10 years ago. I won't speak to your age, but definitely with the job market of today. But it was very hard to find work 10 years ago. And a lot of people were taking at least a year on the market to find work. So I knew I was looking at that, a year to find work out of my freelance business into a regular job. So I started working on it. And after about a year and a half, I was still working on it, still trying to find that job that I wanted. So each week I would interview, I would anticipate the questions they were going to ask me, and I would write out very specific answers to the questions. So, the questions, very common things. What's your biggest mistake you've ever made in your work? I'd anticipate everything they're going to answer, and I would have my canned answers ready to go. I would have my very specific answers. I would read them off the paper as they asked me the questions. All very good answers, but it was very logical. After a year and a half, it wasn't going well. So I read an article that was about how that's the wrong way to do it. I was looking for answers, and they said, that's the wrong way to do it. It'll sound rehearsed. It's too, you need to express yourself. And when you're just reading, even your own writing, you're not expressing yourself. So they said to focus on preparing a personal statement. Mm-hmm. So I went and I wrote a personal worth statement. It ended up being like an essay, an essay about what I'm worth and what I can bring to a company and all of that information. So I wrote it, and then I didn't even take it into the interview with me. Like, I didn't take the answers to my regular questions in. I just wrote this statement, and it was for me, and it was everything that I can bring to somebody. And then I went to the next interview, and every interview after that, I got offered a job. It really is about turning it from a logical process into more of a spiritual or emotional process. And it makes a difference in so many parts of our lives.
That's very interesting, because you went from basically coming up with a script on basically yourself to coming up with really a second script, but a more naturally human-centered script that really talked about you as an individual, and purposely putting you out there for a next career, for your next step in your career.
Yeah. And then I threw the script away, because you, even with that, you can't read from it. You just have to confirm it to yourself, right?
Right.
It has to be something that happens in your mind. And then you can talk about yourself in a way that's meaningful, not just logic.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, this is a good tip on interviewing too. So for all those of you out there who are going through interviews right now, this is a good tip. Make sure you know yourself, not just on paper, not just on yes, I worked 10 years in marketing, or I worked 20 years in HR. That's great. But what did you really do? What
did it mean to people?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth.
And getting other people to believe something that you yourself don't necessarily believe, that's a pretty tall task. That's a difficult challenge.
Yeah, most of us are harder on ourselves than anyone else is on us, especially about our professional accomplishments. So, I mean, you just kind of have to be real about that to yourself, so that you can talk about it with other people. But the idea of living with intent and purpose, it really is more about that emotional thing. It's not about, I want to give to 10 charities this year, and I'm going to do this by, December. And it's more about, what do you want your life to mean, right? What do you want your life to be about? And it's a very emotional question, and it's not something that can be accomplished with a checklist.
Right. No, it certainly cannot. So good point there, Malinda. So how does one do things with intent?
For me, like, the thing that I want my life to be about, and I'm not talking about, like, of course, we all want our life to be about our families and our kids and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that. You have to put that aside, because of course my life is about my family. But when you talk about the other aspects of your life, not just professionally, but personally, what do you want to accomplish in your life? You just kind of have to think about it. What means something to you at this moment? And it could change over time. But, like, just as an example, for me, it's travel. I love to travel. I love going out and seeing new places, new countries, new people. I love experiencing a place through its food. And I think it just feeds my soul. And I think the best way to explore is to explore the world. It's the best way to open your horizons. I took my son to Germany a few years ago, and he was in high school, and you could just watch his view of the world open up as he was experiencing a different culture. So, I mean, that's a priority to me. It's something I want to do with intent in my life. It's something that I want to be a part of my life every day. So, like, what does that look like, right? I can't travel every day. I can't get on a plane every morning and go to Paris. I work. I work a lot.
We all wish we could do that.
Exactly. But I can bring it into my everyday life, right? So, one of the things I did is I went out and got a credit card where I earned points that can be used for any travel. So this credit card, the points that I earn, I can use them toward airplane tickets. I can use them toward hotels. It transfers to all of the major vendors. Everything I buy every month, I put on this credit card, earn points, and then I pay it off at the end of the month in full. So, not carrying any balance. Part of my living with intent is that whenever I go out and buy something, I know that I'm earning points so that I can travel this year. And the points help you I mean, hotels, airfares, it really reduces the cost and makes all that easier. Another way I live with intent is, the places I choose to work. I choose to go to work at places who encourage that type of thing. I work at Mosher. We have flexible time off, which means you can take time off as much as you need and as much as you want, as long as it's planned. I mean, and within reason. So I can take off 2 weeks to go on that dream vacation, that type of thing. That's another way that I plan that into my life around being able to travel.
I gotta say, we both have the same intent.
Yeah.
Because I love to travel. For those of you who don't know, I lived overseas twice, thanks to a previous life prior to Mosher, and I got to travel a lot. And just like you, Malinda, I mean, my family and my wife and I, we encouraged traveling. When we had our one son and we lived down in South America in Colombia, that was an eye-opening experience for him, because obviously we lived in a country that we lived in the capital city, but beyond the capital city, there was a lot to experience, good and bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But it gave him a different meaning of what, living abroad, living in the US, what that means for him. And then we got to live in a different place in South America, in Chile, which is a little bit more advanced, a little bit more European-ish. So that was a different perspective as well. So, and then all of our travels just for leisure has been wonderful. And so we do things with intent, and obviously the pandemic has made us suffer a little bit.
The pandemic was hard on those of us who love to travel. It was rough because, and it's hard to get back into it, it seems like. But that was rough for those of us who love to go places, and we had to cancel our trips we had planned. And
we love to take cruises, and that's been one of the things that has affected us a lot, because we don't feel comfortable going into such a tight space, on the sea with a bunch of people that you don't know what's happening, with them. So it's kind of, we're thinking about it. We're intently going after cruises right now, so we'll see in the future. But that's a great point that you make about living with intent, and using travel as a great example, because I feel a lot of people out there are gonna hear this and they're gonna relate. They're gonna feel identified with this topic. So obviously we wouldn't be called a technology podcast if we didn't introduce it during our episodes, and this is no exception. So what is the correlation between technology and intentional living?
Yeah, I mean, technology, it plays such a critical role in our lives. Does it make it harder or easier for us to live with intent? And it can depend. So, it seems like our phones, that technology, it makes it easier to do stuff without intent, right? If you have a break, you just pick up your phone and scroll on Facebook, and those are all seem like things that are not a part of your intent and your purpose, right? It's just something to waste time. Our phones make that so much easier than it used to be. You don't even have to plan it. You just have to have it with you. How lost would you be if you didn't have your phone one day? I just can't even imagine. But if we use technology, it can be a part of how we live with intent and purpose. It can be a part of the whole thing. You can take that technology and allow it into the small tasks and moments of downtime and make that better. So if you look at an example, if somebody's intent was to was very environmentally minded, if their intent was based around environmental consciousness and conservation, what that might look like for them is maybe they go online and find their morning coffee. They order it from a sustainable farm. That stuff is easy to find online now. Someplace that does sustainable farming, you can make that your morning coffee and order that online. You could order a composting bin. You can compost your grounds and stuff like that. Maybe you have an electric vehicle. That's technology that's come around that helps if that's your purpose. You could even there's search engines out there that plant trees when you use them. And you, if a lot of people use it, it plants trees and they're very sustainable. Maybe your work or your church or something like that, use a battery recycling program where people can bring their old batteries in. You can do something like that. There's just a lot, you could do like points and stuff like that, like I do for travel. You could do that for your purpose. So technology makes all of those things easier and more accessible for people to build it into your life to help with your intent and purpose.
Well, like you mentioned, when you to use your example about using the credit card, you can go on your phone and check the status of your rewards, like where you
Sure.
are, etc., so that you can meet that goal.
Yeah. And one of the things that I do is I've joined. So one of the next trips we want to take is Scotland and Ireland.
Oh,
And so I joined this Facebook group of people who are traveling to Scotland and Ireland.
this
It's
is very
Facebook,
dangerous
it's
for
just
me right
it.
now.
Oh, I know.
No,
But
it seriously is. I have a big birthday milestone next year, and
uh-huh.
I may or may not be hounding my wife to take me somewhere because I did it for her in 2019. I'm not going to mention anything, but we did take a cruise out of the Baltics. We took a cruise out of Copenhagen in Denmark, 2019, through the Baltic. So, honey, if you're listening, just FYI. All right, carry on, Malinda. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, I joined this Facebook group and it's people who are actively traveling there, and they give tips and hints. They share their itineraries. They share pictures of, the cottages they went to and the castles. And like, instead of just flipping through Facebook at what my family's doing, like I'll go through there and go to my Scotland and Ireland travel group, and I'll see what those people are doing and see how the lines at the airport in Dublin are. And I'm educating myself 5 minutes at a time about that trip that I'm planning at some point in the future. And that's what it's about too. And technology has made that possible. So
yes, it's interesting that you mentioned the 5 minutes at a time, because in this age, and I'm going to use a phrase that Matt Bennett used last week in our episode, of instant gratification, where we just want everything in small samples. So going in there, scrolling through those posts for 5 minutes, it kind of just makes you feel like, I'm almost there. And
Yeah.
it just kind of helps you to continue living with that intent and purpose.
Yeah, I think so.
That's great. So now, looking at things from an organizational standpoint, how can a tech company operate with intent and purpose?
I mean, it has to be like an organizational goal that feeds itself into the everyday life of the company, right? So, I mean, I can only speak from the tech company I work for, but at Mosier, one of our goals is giving back to the community. And there's little things all over the company about this. Not only do we do a lot of events, we do a lot of charity, we do a lot of that, but it's small things. If you go into our offices, into our cafes, there's like a box of treats and snacks and things. So it's not just something that they bought on, at Costco and put in there. We order them from a company that takes part of the money from the snacks and donates it to world charities, right? So when you go and pick a bag of candy out of that, there's a little ad on the bottom of where that came from, and that we order these every month for the offices, and part of that money goes back to charity. So, it's done with intent and purpose, more than just going to a store and buying candy or snacks or chips. We do that too to supplement, but the one box we order every month is from the charity, and that's part of how we push that forward, that this is something we want to do every day, not just on Habitat for Humanity Build Day. It's part of our culture, and we do it with intent at the company all the time.
Yeah, and I see it every day when we're in the office. Obviously, the people who are part of this podcast see it every day. But beyond that, I mean, I think, we make efforts to be, environmentally friendly. We have battery recycling. We have EV.
Absolutely. charging units for cars.
Charging units, I'm sorry, thank you. For cars outside, I mean, we do have several employees who own EV vehicles. And I mean, that is obviously environmentally conscious. We do it with intent. Mosher provides a great resource and a great, quality for our employees with that small example.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and with the conservation and with the giving back and really all of our core values, we try to incorporate those things into the fabric of what we do every day. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about that, doing things with intent and thinking about how to incorporate those things into the fabric of it.
Right. And well, with that, we'd like to thank Malinda for joining us today again and Ask You Anything to talk about living with intent and purpose. Malinda, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great to be here again.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask You Anything presented by Mosher Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to our very own Malinda Lowder on living with intent and purpose. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. If you have an idea or a topic you'd like us to explore, please reach out to us through our social media channels. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, remember to live with intent and purpose. And so long, everybody.